hopefully under better circumstances next time. But this is an issue right now we're dealing with, the mortgage issue, part of it. How big of a problem is this?
Well, the mortgage boycotts, the biggest problem is that it attracts headlines and it weighs down sentiment, which has been the central problem, faced by the sector. So in terms of size, our bank team estimates that the total amount of mortgages that could be affected is about 1 trillion renminbi. Now that sounds like a big number, but China also has a very big banking system. So that's about 2.5% of all mortgages, about 0.5% of all loans. So it's not big enough to really, cast a big threat on the system.
On the banking system, but on the property side, is that problem and all of it really, all symptoms of it? Do you think that they're able to ring fence that?
Well, so as I mentioned before, the problem is really the broadcast effect. So they do need to address this problem, and they need to, ease minds and make buyers more comfortable.
It's a confidence crisis.
Yes, yeah. So I think this is going to take a bit of time to resolve. But in the meantime, the government is looking into it and do seem to be paying quite a bit of attention to it, as it does occupy quite a lot of attention of the public.
Do you think having state-owned firms with bond guarantees, what we've been hearing in terms of what could happen in terms of liquidity support, does that do enough to turn around the story in any way, Charles, or are you still looking for more from a credit agency?
Well, the bottom line is that these guaranteed bonds is at most going to be an interim measure, and it's just getting started. So we're not really seeing that many developers, benefiting from that as of yet. So it needs to come into shape, come into form, probably in a much broader scale, for that to kind of reverse the sector's problems. And at the end of the day, what's really happening is that home buyers are worried about buying homes, so that needs to change. And before that changes, and sales continue to decline, then the sector will continue to be in trouble. So the developers getting into better shape will help. Other measures could potentially help, but that is the core problem.
Do you see any sector or any sort of company that might be immune from this turmoil in the property sector right now? Or is this something that you think even some of these better quality sort of names could also be impacted too?
Well, the core problem being that home buyers are worried about buying pre-sold homes that won't get delivered. There are a handful of developers that those worries are less pronounced. So some of the large, robust, and many of them state-owned firms don't really face that problem. And perhaps some of the firms that are at the local level that hasn't racked up as much leverage and didn't attract as many negative headlines and still have access to funding, maybe they continue to operate. So I think as it stands right now, it's very much buyers beware, and the home buyers have a cloud of worry above them, but they still need to buy homes. People still do need to buy property, and there's still demand for quality housing. So the sector will continue, but under a much more sluggish state.
Charles, I guess the question there then becomes, it's a question that bond markets have been trying to figure out the last 12 months. Where do you draw the line, right? Country Garden, just as an example, right? Who would have thought this one would be, Fitch yesterday, of course, downgraded at the junk, would be in the same sort of pool as the others. And I guess the question, the pricing in this offshore bond market, almost everything looks distressed. Do you think it's justified right now, or is that also an overreaction, you think?
Well, I think in large part they're probably justified. There are a lot of developers that have defaulted. Many of them have been unable to access bank funding as well as capital markets.
That's right, yeah.
So they're going to have problems paying debt that's coming due, especially since their sales, the weaker ones especially, have dropped 60 to 70% year on year. So cash is basically not coming in, whether from sales or from their funding sources. So for those names, obviously they they are distressed, and the prices should reflect that. But there are certain, as I say, just a few developers that can withstand this, and the prices reflect that too. So in the middle, there could be a few that could make their way out of it, but we're still kind of in the early days because we do need to see income coming in. We do need to see sales recover, and we do need to see sentiment stabilize, and that has a kind of a virtuous cycle effect when it goes in that direction.
Yeah.
Now it's a rather vicious cycle, but at some point that should turn.